nosotros estamos en una zona netamente selvática. La línea de adyacencia va desde el norte hasta el sur, va desde Modesto Méndez hasta Aguas Turbias, tanto en el norte como en el sur. Esta línea tiene 215 kilómetros de extensión.
De allí vino él, se buscó creo con los de la OAS y de allí vino el proyecto para acá, para Judá. Y fue que lo dieron el terreno y lo dieron todo que era mano de obra y el material para hacer las casas que están ahorita. Y por ese motivo estamos aquí viviendo todavía.
La misión continúa trabajando en la implementación de medidas de fomento de la confianza mientras se aguarda el resultado del reclamo que está atendiendo la Corte Internacional de Justicia por la disputa marítima, territorial e insular. Nuestra oficina en la zona de adyacencia realiza verificaciones a solicitud de ambos gobiernos, facilita reuniones y patrullajes conjuntos entre las Fuerzas Armadas y promueve una cultura de paz y cooperación entre las comunidades locales.
Children will be children. And they have harmony. They don't see each other as a different country, but they see each other that they're growing together.
Esta organización es el guardián regional en defensa de la democracia, la libertad y los derechos humanos. Los países se han comprometido con estos valores a través de instrumentos legales como la Carta Democrática Interamericana, la Convención Americana de Derechos Humanos y todas las demás convenciones interamericanas. Nuestro trabajo es mantener los más altos estándares. Debemos ser objetivos, analizar los hechos, denunciar cuando veamos corrupción, inequidad o amenazas a la libertad. En esos casos no podemos ser neutrales.
More than 100 years since the inauguration of this building, the OAS headquarters, our institution still brings together the peoples of the Americas to address our responsibilities as a partnership of nations. As we look to the future, our work must also focus on the construction of a positive agenda that continues to favorably impact millions of lives every day.
The COVID-19 pandemic brought unprecedented challenges to our member states and the people we serve. In response, the OAS Secretariat for Integral Development adopted a three-pronged approach by 1. Adjusting our portfolio of existing projects, 2. Exploring new projects to meet emerging needs, and 3. Expanding multi-sectoral partnerships. The results achieved in 2020 demonstrate the resilience of our member states and the commitment of the OAS SETI to work with member states and partners towards our common goals in the development of our region. Our Network on Competitiveness launched the COVID-19 Ideas Accelerator, sharing 250 tools, health solutions, responses, and recovery plans. The Network for Labor Administration published a portfolio of responses from ministries of labor to COVID-19, sharing over 420 measures taken to protect workers, employment, and income. Likewise, the Inter-American Teacher Education Network series, Teaching STEM in Quarantine, provided 117,000 teachers with key tools to continue advancing STEM education during the pandemic. Through its network and platforms, the Inter-American Committee on Ports promoted international and national best practices, guidelines, protocols, and recommendations on COVID-19 safety measures and continuity of logistic operations. Initiatives such as the Education in Times of Change platform allowed us to meet urgent needs by offering timely tools on virtual education and a dedicated space for ministries to share strategies, actions, and solutions. Other programs such as the Row Fund stepped up, providing emergency grants to offset the challenges imposed on our students by the pandemic. SETI's partnerships are adding value to member states in the form of technical assistance, training, and access to tools and services. In partnership with leading private sector institutions, we offered micro, small, and medium enterprises access to online tools and training, increasing their visibility and participation in e-commerce, a key to their survival and growth in the pandemic and post-pandemic era. A new OAS SETI Facebook initiative provided 85,000 MSMEs across the region with capacity building opportunities and WhatsApp business tools to aid response, recovery, and resilience building. The Caribbean Small Business Development Centers program achieved real impact, supporting new businesses, expanding sales, and driving growth. A new network of Caribbean SPDCs will broaden the program's reach. The Inter-American Committee on Tourism, the C2, convened ministerial-level policy dialogue in an urgent response to the impact of the pandemic on the hard-hit tourism and hospitality sectors. Policymakers and experts discussed biosanitary protocols, travel and visa facilitation, among other critical areas for the sector's recovery. Partnering with the George Washington University and the U.S. Bureau of Indian Affairs, we went ahead with the scheduled first Indigenous Tourism Forum of the Americas, pivoting to a virtual format and convening over 240 participants from indigenous communities, the private sector, and governments. SETI also integrated sustainable development practices in the COVID-19 response. The pandemic is a daily reminder of the links between water, health, sanitation, food security, and nutrition. We ensured the continuity of our water management projects in the Plata Basin and worked with governments and partners in the design of an investment portfolio valued at $90 million. Additionally, the Energy and Climate Partnership of the Americas continued to share relevant best practices and responses to the pandemic on energy and air quality. These few examples indicate our collective impact. We cannot do this alone. It is now more urgent than ever to address the region's structural weaknesses, to recover from the health, economic, and social crises occasioned by the pandemic and prepare for future shocks. It is imperative that we work together as we risk losing recent development gains and seeing millions fall back into poverty. It is time for the region to redirect course and pursue a more sustainable, resilient, and equitable future for all. We are in this together.
But the resilience building agenda is too big for any one stakeholder to address acting alone, and simply bringing together stakeholders, whether at the national, subnational, regional, or global level, is not enough. Effective, focused, and sustained coordination among stakeholders is paramount to provide countries with integrated and comprehensive support.
The OAS, as a hemispheric forum and honest broker, must continue to facilitate this process while we work with member states towards the attainment of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. Cooperation, collaboration, and partnerships that include all actors strengthen us, enabling us to be more than the sum of our parts. We can and we must work together. The future of our region depends on it.
Me and my kids have been there for over an year right now. And children are friends. It doesn't matter where they come from.
Nosotros estamos en una zona netamente selvática. La línea de adyacencia va desde el norte hasta el sur, va desde Modesto Méndez hasta Aguas Turbias, tanto en el norte como en el sur. Esta línea tiene 215 kilómetros de extensión.
De allí vino él, se buscó creo con los de la OEA y de allí vino el proyecto para acá, para Judá. Y fue que lo dieron el terreno y lo dieron todo que era mano de obra y el material para hacer las casas que están ahorita. Y por ese motivo estamos aquí viviendo todavía.
La misión continúa trabajando en la implementación de medidas de fomento de la confianza mientras aguarda el resultado del reclamo que está atendiendo la Corte Internacional de Justicia por la disputa marítima, territorial e insular. Nuestra oficina en la zona de adyacencia realiza verificaciones a solicitud de ambos gobiernos, facilita reuniones y patrullajes conjuntos entre las Fuerzas Armadas y promueve una cultura de paz y cooperación entre las comunidades locales.
Children will be children, and they have harmony. They don't see each other as a different country, but they see each other that they're growing together.
Esta organización es el guardián regional en defensa de la democracia, la libertad y los derechos humanos. Los países se han comprometido con estos valores a través de instrumentos legales como la Carta Democrática Interamericana, la Convención Americana de Derechos Humanos y todas las demás convenciones interamericanas. Nuestro trabajo es mantener los más altos estándares. Debemos ser objetivos, analizar los hechos, denunciar cuando veamos corrupción, inequidad o amenazas a la libertad. En esos casos no podemos ser neutrales.
More than 100 years since the inauguration of this building, the OAS headquarters, our institution still brings together the peoples of the Americas to address our responsibilities as a partnership of nations. As we look to the future, our work must also focus on the construction of a positive agenda that continues to favorably impact millions of lives every day.
The COVID-19 pandemic brought unprecedented challenges to all member states and the people we serve. In response, the OAS Secretariat for Integral Development adopted a three-pronged approach by 1. Adjusting our portfolio of existing projects, 2. Exploring new projects to meet emerging needs, and 3. Expanding multi-sectoral partnerships. The results achieved in 2020 demonstrate the resilience of our member states and the commitment of the OAS SETI to work with member states and partners towards our common goals in the development of our region. Our Network on Competitiveness launched the COVID-19 Ideas Accelerator, sharing 250 tools, health solutions, responses, and recovery plans. The Network for Labor Administration published a portfolio of responses from ministries of labor to COVID-19, sharing over 420 measures taken to protect workers, employment, and income. Likewise, the Inter-American Teacher Education Network series, Teaching STEM in Quarantine, provided 117,000 teachers with key tools to continue advancing STEM education during the pandemic. Through its network and platforms, the Inter-American Committee on Ports promoted international and national best practices, guidelines, protocols, and recommendations on COVID-19 safety measures and continuity of logistic operations. Initiatives such as the Education in Times of Change platform allowed us to meet urgent needs by offering timely tools on virtual education and a dedicated space for ministries to share strategies, actions, and solutions. Other programs such as the Row Fund stepped up, providing emergency grants to offset the challenges imposed on our students by the pandemic. SETI's partnerships are adding value to member states in the form of technical assistance, training, and access to tools and services. In partnership with leading private sector institutions, we offered micro, small, and medium enterprises access to online tools and training, increasing their visibility and participation in e-commerce, a key to their survival and growth in the pandemic and post-pandemic era. A new OAS SETI Facebook initiative provided 85,000 MSMEs across the region with capacity building opportunities and WhatsApp business tools to aid response, recovery, and resilience building. The Caribbean Small Business Development Centers program achieved real impact, supporting new businesses, expanding sales, and driving growth. A new network of Caribbean SPDCs will broaden the program's reach. The Inter-American Committee on Tourism, the C2, convened ministerial-level policy dialogue in an urgent response to the impact of the pandemic on the hard-hit tourism and hospitality sectors. Policymakers and experts discussed biosanitary protocols, travel and visa facilitation, among other critical areas for the sector's recovery. Partnering with the George Washington University and the U.S. Bureau of Indian Affairs, we went ahead with the scheduled first Indigenous Tourism Forum of the Americas, pivoting to a virtual format and convening over 240 participants from indigenous communities, the private sector, and governments. SETI also integrated sustainable development practices in the COVID-19 response. The pandemic is a daily reminder of the links between water, health, sanitation, food security, and nutrition. We ensured the continuity of our water management projects in the Plata Basin and worked with governments and partners in the design of an investment portfolio valued at $90 million. Additionally, the Energy and Climate Partnership of the Americas continued to share relevant best practices and responses to the pandemic on energy and air quality. These few examples indicate our collective impact. We cannot do this alone. It is now more urgent than ever to address the region's structural weaknesses, to recover from the health, economic, and social crises occasioned by the pandemic and prepare for future shocks. It is imperative that we work together as we risk losing recent development gains and seeing millions fall back into poverty. It is time for the region to redirect course and pursue a more sustainable, resilient, and equitable future for all. We are in this together.
But the resilience building agenda is too big for any one stakeholder to address acting alone, and simply bringing together stakeholders, whether at the national, subnational, regional, or global level, is not enough. Effective, focus and sustained coordination among stakeholders is paramount to provide countries with integrated and comprehensive support.
The OAS, as a hemispheric forum and honest broker, must continue to facilitate this process while we work with member states towards the attainment of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. Cooperation, collaboration, and partnerships that include all actors strengthen us, enabling us to be more than the sum of our parts. We can and we must work together. The future of our region depends on it.
Me and my kids have been there for over an year right now. And children are friends. It doesn't matter where they come from.
emblematic tourism point that we have, and it is the Road of the Jesuits. This is comprised of a very key component road for the touristic development of all of Latin America. Now, I would like to express the pride that I feel. We're going to be showing you the temple of San Buenaventura, which is our patron saint. This is a temple which was built in 1955 and it was concluded in 1972. It is a religious and cultural center in our city. On the outside, it is a very simple building compared to the wealth that we are able to see inside, which is part of the Franciscan religion or culture. It's a few kilometers from the capital of our city. I would now like to move on to the fourth plenary session. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. We're beginning the fourth plenary session. During this session, we will be reviewing rural community-based tourism. As all colleagues are aware, I'm sure, the work plan of the Inter-American Committee on Tourism includes the topic of rural community-based tourism and indigenous tourism. rural and community-based tourism. This is an integral part of our topic. I am honored to be joined today by Ms. Catherine Ism-Klaus, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs Policy and Economic Development at the U.S. Department of the Interior. This is the government agency with whose support the America's Indigenous Tourism Forum was held in 2020. This year, in 2021, they are launching the Indigenous Tourism Collaborative. I'm very pleased to offer her a warm welcome to Ms. Ism-Klaus, and you have the floor, madam.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the kind introduction. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon and greetings to all the participants in the 25th Inter-American Congress of Ministers and High-Level Authorities of Tourism. Thank you to the Organization of American States Secretariat for Integral Development for inviting me to speak, and to the nation of Paraguay for hosting this event. It's an honor to be here with you today virtually. I'm delighted to speak to you today on supporting Indigenous tourism in the best and worst of time. As you well know, travel and tourism has been the hardest hit economic sector in the world during the global pandemic. In the United States, the decline in travel and tourism in 2020 due to COVID-19 was devastating to our economy. The $500 billion loss in travel spending in 2020 alone cost the U.S. $1.1 trillion in economic output. Travel and tourism jobs accounted for 35% of the total jobs lost in the first year of the pandemic. In the best of times, tourism provides a promising approach to sustainable development, a way for Indigenous communities to enhance self-determination and self-sufficiency, alleviate poverty, increase access to healthcare and education, and conserve their cultural and natural resources. Prior to the global pandemic, Indigenous communities from northernmost Alaska to southernmost Chile welcomed growing numbers of visitors. This provided opportunities to share their own narratives and traditions and to generate economic development. Indigenous tourism in the United States had experienced exponential growth in the years leading up to the pandemic, increasing 180% from 2007 to 2017. In 2019, 75% of surveyed tribal nations in the United States said they expected tourism to increase in 2020. Then, of course, COVID hit. As the country focused on the immediate health and safety concerns of the COVID-19 pandemic, a pandemic that disproportionately impacted tribal nations, tribal economies, and specifically the tribal tourism industry were hit hard. Despite this setback, the U.S. Department of the Interior's Office of Indian Economic Development has continued to support building Indigenous tourism capacity by investing in the creation of state and regional tourism alliances and in the growth of a national tribal tourism organization. The Organization of American States, the George Washington University International Institute of Tourism Studies, and the Office of Indian Economic Development established a new initiative called the Indigenous Tourism Collaborative of the Americas. The collaborative grew out of an organizing event, the Indigenous Tourism of Americas Forum. That first ever virtual forum was held in October 12 through 16 of 2020 with the participation of nearly 300 Indigenous tourism leaders and tourism industry leaders from all over the Western Hemisphere. The participants included the leaders of the largest tourism industry organizations in the Americas and several ministers of tourism, including Mexico, Ecuador, Dominica, Panama, and El Salvador. The forum inspired a new public-private collaborative with a vision of creating an Indigenous industry and policy leader network that would regularly discuss ideas, experiences, and projects, and conduct a dialogue that would drive collaborative action in support of sustainable development and growth in Indigenous communities. I cannot emphasize enough the significance of an Indigenous-led initiative reaching out to tourism industry leaders and having those industry leaders overwhelmingly respond positively. The collaborative structure is novel and completely voluntary. It's composed of two groups of advisors. One is made up of Indigenous tourism leaders and representatives from tourism communities, entrepreneurs, Indigenous tourism NGOs, and associations. The other is a tourism industry advisory group of leaders from the private sector, national tourism authorities and government entities, destination marketing organizations, academia, NGOs, and others who pledge to support and advance Indigenous tourism. These advisors have joined action teams that were formed around three priorities chosen by the collaborative. Their priorities are COVID-19 recovery, building capacity, sustainability, and technology, and finally, respect, representation, and inclusion in government and industry planning and development. Each priority action team is led by an Indigenous leader supported by an industry champion. The collaborative is at work building an internet repository of resources, tools, and initiatives, and a platform for an ongoing dialogue between Indigenous and industry leaders. The OAS Secretariat for Integral Development lends the collaborative steering committee members who bring their expertise on OAS member countries and the OAS COVID recovery programs already in motion. Through the implementation of congressional legislation, the Office of Indian Economic Development supplies grants for Indigenous tourism capacity initiatives, including the collaborative. We also serve on the collaborative steering committee. The George Washington University Institute of International Studies brings its expertise in creating networks and strategic tourism alliances in many parts of the world, and its graduate students help organize bilingual meetings of the collaborative. This unique collaboration of government, industry, academia, and community provides avenues for each member to do what they do best to create opportunity, capacity, economic viability, and sustainability in Indigenous tourism, advised by Indigenous leaders themselves. Travelers are beginning to explore new places, revisit those they know well, and seek inspiration in new connections with people, cultures, and in nature. Join us on the ground floor of this evolution in travel, supporting your Indigenous communities and tourism industry leaders to create a new tourism network of strength, knowledge, and vision. I thank you sincerely for giving me the opportunity to officially launch the Indigenous Tourism Collaborative of the Americas today at this unique and influential Congress. As Indigenous tourism continues to face one of its greatest challenges with the COVID-19 pandemic, let us work together to reconstruct and rebuild a prosperous and resilient Indigenous tourism economy. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ism Klaus, for your very interesting presentation. I would like to highlight and also acknowledge your government's continued support to Indigenous tourism. It is an important effort undertaken to make tourism in the region more inclusive and so that it would benefit vulnerable communities more, which is also joined by the OAS General Secretariat, the George Washington University. I congratulate the George Washington University, the OAS, and the United States Department of the Interior for launching this very important initiative. We will now be putting on an informative video regarding all the details and the importance and the scope of this collaborative.
Soy de la comunidad Newport, pertenezco a la...
I am currently working as a tourist informant guide in the Mission of Jesus. It helped me to provide a good quality of life to my family, to continue with my studies, and to finish my high school and to study a university career. I'm in law school. My name is Luis Miguel Cabral. I am a Ambaya Guarani. Here, we always tell our visitors a little bit about our history. We tell them a little bit about our community, about our language, our life. In this place of sales of crafts, the members of the community bring and they showcase their handcrafts. They do this on a weekly basis. They make their profits, and they take it to their community. My name is Agustin. My last name is Vera. I am Mibia Guarani from the Pindo indigenous community. We are dedicated to craftsmanship and agriculture. I work at Senatur, and I am a guide in the church and in the school as well. My name is Irma Cabral. I am a tour guide of the Guarani Jesuit mission of San Cosme and Saint Damian. In our community, we're dedicated to our crafts, and we teach children about our food. And as a Mabaya Guarani, we have our own lifestyle. We have our own food, our crafts, our traditional games, our crafts that we also we've learned from our own grandparents. Tourism in our country generated more than 63,000 jobs directly in recent years. Paraguay rises united. Let's raise up Paraguay. Very well. We have shared a video from Paraguay that our community-based indigenous communities have been working on. There are two different communities. They have their guides. These are youngsters that are part of our ancestral peoples. And also, we have seen the mission of San Cosme and Saint Damian. They have guides that are part of the indigenous communities. We are very proud as Paraguay to be able to showcase the very hard work, the sustained ongoing work that we have been carrying out with these very intelligent students. They are civil servants of the tourism ministry. We also have another video, which is the Indigenous Tourism Collaborative of the Americas. Do we have that video ready to go? Indeed, I have another video ready to go. Please proceed.
The Indigenous Tourism Collaborative of the Americas, comprised of more than 100 indigenous, tourism, and government leaders. We have been meeting all year to confer, agree on a vision, and form action teams. Now, we will launch an internet repository of resources, a platform to sustain dialogue and advance the action priorities, which are Indigenous tourism COVID recovery, building capacity for Indigenous tourism, and respect and inclusion. The Indigenous Tourism Collaborative of the Americas asks you to join our journey. Together, we will create a way forward for tourism in the Americas, driven by inspired and empowered Indigenous communities, determining their own fates and futures. We welcome your participation and your support.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. We have now concluded this session, and we're going to be starting our 5th plenary session. During this session, we will be considering strategies to mitigate the negative effects of COVID-19 on tourism, the protocols, and technological tools. It is well known that due to the to the COVID-19 pandemic, governments felt the need to adopt measures to guarantee tourism activities and for them to be carried out in the safest way possible. And in this regard, countries have been working on issuing biosafety protocols. In this regard, we have also sought to use technological tools which were available to facilitate travel as well as tourism. The following presentations, which we'll be listening to, will be covering many of the measures which have been taken. Our first speaker in this session is Mr. Alejandro Varela, Deputy Regional Director for the Americas of the United Nations World Tourism Organization. Thank you very much, Alejandro, for being with us here today.
I'm sorry, but Mr. Varela's mic is turned off. Alejandro? Excuse me. Thank you, Minister. I think you can hear me now. I hope everything is working. And I would like that the OAS please put my presentation up on the screen. This is the first slide where I cite the OAS, and I thank them very much to be able to share this presentation with you. This presentation will be based on the issue of what's the state of tourism currently. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. That's the one. Tourism has shown signs of a recovery in these last 2 months, June and July. Our figures cover 7 months from this year. According to a barometer we had 54 million tourism. This is 64% less than the same months in 2019. Although the results are better than what we saw in April 2020. So we should make a comparison between these 54 million. The 54 million this year are higher than the 34 million from last year, but this is way below the 667 million tours that we had in 2016. In this slide, we're looking at what are the factors of influence. We see a bit of a rebound in most destinations in comparison with 2020, although 2021 is a difficult year for tourism, and there is a decrease of 80% in the first 7 months as compared to the year before. When we look at Asia Pacific, they have the worst results, 95% decrease in the 7 months of this year. Next, Middle East, a decrease of 82%. Then Europe, Africa with 77%. The region of the Americas had a lesser decrease than other regions. And of the 4 sub-regions, the best region was the Caribbean. Africa, some Asian destinations, and the Caribbean had better results than even before the pandemic. Next slide. the rebound of tourism and with the benefits of tourism are seen. This, however, is being torpedoed a bit by uneven regulations, and so this affects the confidence that tourists have. However, we see an increase in the confidence of travelers. We have destinations opening, especially in the Americas and Europe. There are two main factors here. Lifting of restrictions for vaccinated travelers and also measures taken against COVID. This has meant that consumers have more confidence, and so we have more mobility, which is safe in Europe and other parts of the world. However, I must point out that most Asian destinations are closed to non-essential travel. With regard to tourism income, they're not very good, but they have been better in the first 7 months of this year, a modest increase, and some places did better even than in 2016. For example, Mexico, which had the same income in June of this year as in 2016, and in July we had a 2% increase as compared to 2019. Next slide. So, looking toward the future, what is the outlook for the third quarter of this year? In other words, September to December. Well, according to our last survey, this was done by a panel of experts. 53% believe this will be worse than was expected. Only 32% believe it will get better towards the end of the year. And it is expected that there will be a rebound with regard to trips, especially next year, especially in the second and third quarters. First, we have great demand for international travel, and destinations have begun to receive visitors in a safe way. It is not a full rebound of tourism. We need to have standardized protocols and also have more people vaccinated. Now I want to talk about inclusive tourism. Next slide, please. Now, in this inclusive community development, we have been working in pro of inclusion, and we have been working for community development, which protects culture and the environment, which protects vulnerable groups, and also gives benefits to vulnerable groups and SMEs, etc. Based thereon, we have a framework for community development. We want to empower women, provide prosperity, have synergies. I have very little time, so I am going very quickly. Next slide, which is the empowerment of women. We are working on this issue. We have publications on the empowerment of women where we address many of these issues: leadership, employment, access to markets. Next slide. We have another publication which has to do with indigenous peoples, which our last speaker was talking about. We also have one with regard to accessibility, recovery, and people with disabilities. We have another publication with regard to free accessibility. We also have another that has to do with cultural tourism, which is my last slide. I wanted to talk about the situation, and since we are talking about inclusion based on tourism, I wanted to include that issue as well. And I thank you for letting me make this presentation. I hope I didn't go over time. Thank you for your attention. Thank you very much, Alejandro Varela, for that presentation and for sharing that useful information. The airline sector is key for tourism and for the incredible development that we have seen in the last 100 years. Now we will hear a presentation about the protocols and technological applications available to be able to travel in a safe way. For this presentation, it is a pleasure to greet and give the floor to Horacio Marquez, Regional Director, Member and External Relations, Latin America and Caribbean, the Americas, from the International Air Transport Association, IATA.
American states for extending this invitation to IATA to participate. It really is an honor to be able to be here and speak with you all today. As you can see, I will be presenting in English, so I hope that doesn't pose a challenge or a problem, but I appreciate your consideration. This is intended to be an interactive session, so do feel free, please, to raise questions or comments as at any point in the process. So to the next slide, please. And I think, yeah, next slide, please. Although we'll discuss the impact and some of the protocols just later on, it's important to highlight that tourism represents approximately 13% of the world's GDP, and globally 3.6% of jobs are in the tourism field, which means aviation is fundamentally critical for tourism to take place. It provides needed connectivity for people and goods, especially in this region where there's no viable alternative mode of transport that can similarly provide timely and efficient links to bring people together. So it is critical that we be able to effectively reinstate connections, air services, to regain that connectivity on a global and on a regional basis to kickstart the tourism industry again. Next slide, please. I wanted to provide a quick view at the global level with respect to current travel restrictions in place, which are affecting the mobility of transborder crossing international travel. You can see that most countries in the world are still in a shade of blue, which means that these countries are either totally or partially restricted to entry. The loss of connectivity, border closures, etc., and travel restrictions and quarantine requirements, the multitude of these types of limitations have caused considerable damage to our economies and to our people. In the Americas, currently only Colombia and Mexico remain completely unrestricted to entry at this time. So that gives you some sense of perspective as to the challenge that we're confronted with. Next slide, please. Here we compare connectivity in North America in red on the left side and in the Latin Caribbean regions in blue. This is pre-COVID versus mid-2021 as we cope with the COVID situation. In Latin America and the Caribbean, we've lost connectivity, air connectivity in approximately 665 city pairs, which importantly, this equates to 3.9 million lost jobs and $94 billion in lost GDP. Air services and the air service sector is trying to come back, but clearly with continued border restrictions, this will continue to have catastrophic effects on regional and global connectivity for all of us. Next, please. Regaining or increasing tourism will require governments and industry stakeholders to work together and identify opportunities and develop incentives wherever possible so as to regain passenger confidence and attract travelers back to these countries. IATA is playing a key role in working with governments, advocating for the reopening of markets, and to maintain open borders where possible, while doing everything possible that we can to ensure travelers are able to move safely between countries. Next slide, please. Examples where opportunities exist. The green portion on this graph depicts countries where high vaccination rates are currently in place or taking place, but some of these states remain closed to maintain restrictions in place. But with the application of proper biosafety protocols, which is something we're advocating for, such as antigen testing, they have the potential to reopen and support the recovery of the country's economy. and the tourism sector. We at IATA are advocating for the recovery of travel and tourism, and the airline industry, is collaborating with governments to facilitate the removal of existing restrictions. The airline industry and the wider travel and tourism sector will continue to play a key and pivotal role in the region's economic and social recovery from COVID-19. So we aim to get people flying as soon as possible, and we're asking for that level of engagement on the part of states to work with us wherever possible. You in the area of tourism obviously are fundamental to driving that priority within your states, and so we look forward to being able to work with you more closely and with your health authorities as appropriate and as needed in order to bring this forward. It's a matter of weighing the balance between public health, which we understand is critical and important, but also economic health, which is part of our state's economies that are desperately needed throughout the region, and what we aim to try to affect. Next slide, please. To that end, IATA has focused mainly on promoting that all biosafety protocols set forth by states are harmonized, are in alignment with the World Health Organization's recommendations, and also with ICAO's Council of Aviation Recovery Task Force, CART, guidelines to facilitate the reinstatement of air service operations in this fast evolving environment. This also entails the use of automation to facilitate passenger processing prior to and during the travel process. For example, IATA's Travel Pass tool is a tool that's designed not only to enhance the overall passenger journey using a type of digital identity health passport, which is intended to help states ensure that they are mitigating the risk in relation to health, and most importantly, providing the needed confidence to both travelers and state entities. It validates the health credentials and other travel documents provided by passengers that they are being trustworthy and valid for entry. It's also a tool designed to help people travel with ease while meeting compliance with government entry requirements through a more secure and efficient process. We're working with many states in Latin America and the Caribbean and continue to engage with others to promote the use of the Travel Pass application. We encourage you to contact us if you would like to learn more about the tool and how we can work with you and your health authorities and other relevant agencies in your countries to make use of it. In closing, the cooperation between industry and governments in the region will ultimately facilitate the removal of these restrictions that we're currently faced with, and allow aviation and the wider travel and tourism sectors to play the critical pivotal role needed in the region's social and economic recovery from COVID-19. We want to get people flying again, and obviously wanting to have people visit your states to take advantage of the tourism opportunities that you have available to them and to offer, and also ensure that the economic engine that tourism can provide can be reinstated. With that, I close. Thank you for the opportunity again, and open to questions or comments if necessary. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Marquez, for that very complete presentation. I'm sure that together governments and airlines will reach agreements that allow us to use the available technological tools so that we can return to traveling in a safe way and without the obstacles we face now. The Inter-American Development Bank is a multilateral bank which since its creation has been helping countries in times of misfortune and crisis. And this pandemic is no exception. We would now like to give a warm welcome to Ms. Adela Moreda, Tourism Lead Specialist from the Inter-American Development Bank. She will share with us information on the joint initiative between the World Tourism Organization and the Organization of American States to support member states in implementing biosecurity protocols for the tourism sector. Ms. Moreda, thank you for being with us, and you have the floor. Good afternoon. Thank you, Minister, esteemed authorities. Can you tell me if you can hear me? Yes, very well. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Before I begin, I'd like to thank the OAS for providing us this opportunity to provide you with the conclusions that has been financed by the bank. With this technical cooperation, regional recommendations have been prepared with regard to implementing biosafety protocols in Latin America and the Caribbean. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the OAS and also the WTO for supporting this initiative. And I was here some months ago to say that we were doing this work, and now I'd like to announce that we have finished. So I'd like to just give you a summary of these recommendations. I hope they are useful for the region. Next slide. Well, why regional recommendations on biosafety at this time in the pandemic? As my predecessors have said, and as we know, the sector has been one of the hardest hit by COVID. As you can see on the slide, the tourism in Latin America and the Caribbean went down by half, and which is much more than other service sectors. And tourism was responsible for 1/3 of the decrease in regional GDP, which is 7%. So it has had a brutal impact. We see recently that there is some incipient recovery going on. There is still uncertainty because of outbreaks, variants, differing vaccine and vaccination rates, also the time of immunity that vaccines offer. So we need to prioritize tourism that is safe, and protocols will be a key factor for some time to encourage this necessary recovery in the tourism sector. Next slide, please. Thus, at the bank, we have undertaken an effort to draw up these recommendations. These are only offered as guidance. They are not obligatory. And so we did an in-depth assessment of the protocols that were in force in lodging, in restaurants, local transportation, airports, ports, and beaches. Protocols not only from the region and the Caribbean were analyzed, but from other regions in the world in order to have a comparison. We had health experts, tourism experts, and the objective was to determine what do the protocols cover and what is the perception of consumers with regard to these kinds of instruments. Next slide, please. The assessment identified that in every subsector, what are the main nodes of risk while tourism services are offered. And we have 3 transmission pathways. Aerosols, contact when you touch something, and contact also by droplets. And so we looked at the level of coverage of the protocols with regard to these 3 pathways of transmission. Next slide, please. So we were able to draw up maps of risk for all kinds of different destinations, and we looked at the coverage based on the protocols that were analyzed. In red, the coverage is low, and yellow, it's high. And the main conclusions of this assessment that I want to highlight, well, there are 3. First of all, the need to urgently update many of the protocols that were designed at the beginning of the pandemic. Thereafter, we have seen that the main spreading of COVID is through aerosols, but most protocols are focused on transmission with contaminated surfaces. So it is urgent, as I have said, to update these protocols to be able to address all pathways of transmission. Latin America and the Caribbean have developed protocols against COVID, but there is a lack of harmonization in the measures defined, and this is negative with regard to consumers' perception. So this needs to be fixed. And the third conclusion is that the protocols in Latin America and the Caribbean have a coverage which are better than protocols in other regions of the world. This is good news, but as you can see on the slide, it depends on the sector and subsector, and so coverage is uneven. So as I said, with all this information, we have made recommendations under a prism that is quite different from the protocols that exist now. This is based on the latest scientific evidence, which explain the pathways of transmission, and that this varies depending on factors, and when they are combined, this can make something more risky or less. When there's greater ventilation, less risk. When there's more distance, less risk. If you have a mask, less risk. More time of exposure, more risk. Less humidity, more risk. So with all of this information, our recommendations have been based on a dynamic focus. We agree that we need to evaluate in every specific installation, and based on the activities therein, for each specific case, we need to evaluate the level of risk, and then prevention measures that are effective can be established based on this focus, which is dynamic. We have general prevention recommendations, and because we have this combination of factors, but there are specific recommendations for every subsector and every installation that may be included in tourism services. A total of 8 documents were prepared. A document that is cross-cutting, and then one for each of the subsectors. The recommendations are published in 3 languages, and then we also have tools and infographics. The objective is to have an audience that includes, for example, those who are in positions of authority. They can actually encourage protocols, support communication interest groups, and also support implementation. We're also trying to focus this on MSMEs because they have less resources. That's why we are focusing our publications on a website that the bank has. You see the URL here. It's in English and Spanish. We're also producing short videos to be able to disseminate all of these recommendations. We're also going to organize webinars on the 13th with the help of the OAS. We're going to discuss this. We have the focal points of all countries, and a webinar that will be open to tourism authorities in the private sector in November. Next, what do we need from you? Contacts, so that we can get this information to trade associations in your country, support to disseminate the recommendations, and also, any updates so that we can revise the protocols. At the bank, we are available to be able to answer your questions. We can also support individual countries to be able to use these recommendations, disseminate them, and adopt them as necessary. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Ms. Moreira, for informing us of this important initiative. And I want to congratulate and thank the Inter-American Development Bank, the World Tourism Organization, and the Organization of American States for this initiative, which will be very useful for countries and will contribute to having a safer region to travel in. Continuing with this session, I would like to greet Ivan Eskildsen Alfaro, the Minister of Tourism of Panama. Panama is one of the most important hubs for air and maritime transport in the Americas. So it is important to hear about their experience to ensure safe travel. It is a pleasure to invite Mr. Eskildsen to take the floor and share the experience of his country. Good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Minister, and to the entire audience. It's a pleasure for me to be here. I am going to be sharing my screen for the presentation that I have for you here today. Today, this is going to be my presentation that I'm going to be focusing on. On the one hand, I'm going to talk about what Panama has done, what we have focused on, what we have developed during this pandemic, and on the other hand, how we have tried to leverage this time, which has been a time of a lot of suffering, a lot of illness, a lot of sickness for many countries in the world. And furthermore, it has always given us the opportunity to reinvent ourselves. We talk about the transformation of the tourism industry in Panama. That's what we want to share about some of the initiatives we have undertaken. In terms of the initiative to reactivate our economy, we know that finally we are seeing a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, where our country has managed to control the number of COVID-19 cases. And on the other hand, we have over 70% of our population at an age where they can be vaccinated have been vaccinated. So we have launched a pioneer initiative in Latin America to attract tourists, those tourists who would like to improve their health with the vaccine. And that's why we launched this initiative from Vacatur, Panama. That's what it's called. We have launched this initiative, which is called a tourist bond, or this is providing some stimulus. It's trying to boost the demand. This makes it possible so that tourists are going to be able to receive some discounts and also support from the Panamanian government and further incentives. Also in Panama, we are also working with another program from the IDB, a program called IDB Invest, so that some of these tourist companies can reopen their doors. We've been working with them since last year, and we have to have a significant amount of documentation to get this, but we are very pleased in terms of the headway that we have made. We are making some progress, some headway to assist some of these companies. We also have a good piece of good news this year, that the Panama Convention Center, which was an investment of $208 million, is providing an opportunity to reinvigorate, revitalize the event industry. This is a leading edge convention center. It's one of the top ones in Panama and in the region. It can accommodate more than 25,000 people. We also know that in the Congress sector, they do spend more, so they're going to be supporting our economic revitalization. The very first event's going to be held in less than 2 weeks. It's the 27th Annual FCCA Cruise Conference. And we are delighted to have many of our neighboring countries who are going to be attending, who are going to be taking part of this very important event. Furthermore, now I'm talking about the transformation of our industry here and what we're hedging our bets. And we have been working with the UNWTO to rethink our touristic development. How are we going to be distributing all of the benefits equitably, making headway in this transition, and also to be more resilient? We are also preparing to be signatories to the Glasgow Declaration, which will be signed next month. We are committed to all of these actions, and through this new type of tourism that we are betting on and moving towards this new transition. In this regard, we have called for a roundtable about a month ago in the city of Washington. We invited scientists, conservationists, experts, tourist experts, and also company leaders at the Smithsonian. And it is also present in Panama with 11 research centers. It is one of the iconic institutions. This has been very valuable for us to look at the business economic model that we are implementing, that we would like to underscore our biodiversity, our ethnic diversity in conservation, and also focusing and making sure that the centerpiece are always our communities and our people. Panama is called upon and needs to develop this kind of model. We are taking into account that we have over 30% of our country is protected with flora and fauna, land and sea, and this has helped us to support this conservation, to foster our cultural biodiversity. We have a significant amount of indigenous peoples and populations. In this regard, we are focusing on this model, which provides for an opportunity, a sustainable model, which takes into account the future of the market and a more responsible tourists and travelers. We are working with the private and public sector, the scientific community, NGOs, and the general public. We are all focusing on our national development, which is aligned with and to benefit our country. In this regard, what we have done is about 3 weeks ago, we were named the best destination, and this is aligned with conserving our environment, our cultural heritage as well. In this regard, we are also calling upon the private sector as well. We have a virtual forum this is a forum that we have been working on. In addition, we have also implemented a community tourist development initiative, and we are working with other countries, and we are going to implement one of these called Plan Colmena, the Beehive Plan rather. And what we are trying to do is to coordinate all of our efforts to support these communities that we have prioritized during the very first stage. We are also implementing a national plan to make sure that we are opening up roadways throughout our entire country and to include the communities in its upkeep, so they are going to be the first people who are going to be benefiting from this work. Furthermore, we are also working with a loan with the IDB, which will help us have the necessary resources to speed up the improvement and the experience that we can provide to our tourists, and also decentralizing our country. We are focusing on better wealth equity as well. To conclude, we also have a regional project which we just launched last week, and it's called Adventure Next. We are focusing on sustainable development, natural and cultural resources, ecotourism. We want to have this income that these communities will need, this even more feasible, and to make it more possible for them to reap the benefits and to have sustainable benefits, if you will. So in the month of February in Panama, we will have over 100 international companies. This is going to be at the regional level. It's not only going to be focusing on Panama, so we are inviting our peers, our colleagues, and also our neighboring countries. We invite all of you to continue to discover your neighboring countries, our sister and brother countries, and to discover the natural, the rich heritage that we have in Panama. So we give you back the floor. If there are any questions that you would have for Panama, we are willing and able to continue to work together with our brother countries in Latin America. And we are all betting on revitalizing and rebuilding our economies and our futures. Thank you. Thank you very much, Minister. Your presentation was comprehensive for Panama. Panama is very important for the connections within our region, and knowing your experience is incredibly useful to guide the decision-making process at the national and at the regional level. Thank you very much, Minister. We will now start our ministerial dialogue. We have heard such important and very informative interventions. I would like to give the floor to representatives if you want to make any comments, if you want to ask any questions to our presenters. I'm very sorry to say this again, but we do not have that much time, and so I would ask you to please keep your interventions to 3 minutes. Roberto Sanchez has the floor from Peru. Esteemed Chair of the 25th Inter-American Congress of Ministers and High-Level Authorities of Tourism, Sofia Dalfara, Ministry of Tourism of Paraguay, Secretary General Luis Almagro of the OAS, Ms. Kim Orsborn, Executive Secretary of Integral Development of the OAS, distinguished ministers, authorities, member states of the OAS. We wholeheartedly agree in Peru that we know that we need to make headway in the vaccination program so that our peoples within the OAS are going to be immunized to mitigate all of the risks that arise due to COVID-19 and the experiences that we have had. In Peru, our target currently in Peru is 57% of our people have had one shot. 42% of our people have 2 shots. So it's also noteworthy to have this continuous dialogue on clear protocols and in terms of incoming and outgoing people within our countries. We need to foster and make sure that all of these systems are abided by. In Peru, we have certifications in place in the 25 regions and the departments within our country. In this regard, we need to specialize, we need to innovate, we need to have health measures. These are important criteria to meet the needs of the current trends. We need to, after the pandemic, we need to find, people will try to find safe destinations and we'll seek them out. This is an opportunity which will provide alternatives such as for ecotourism or community-based tourism will play a greater role. The international organization and others acknowledge that there are 9 national destinations in Peru because of thanks to the criteria and the requirements that we have. We have one of the national reserves, Alto Mayo in the region of San Martin, the national reserve as well, and the Amazon region, as many others. And we also have the national park, as well as the sacred lakes of the Incas, among many others, and also the Colca Canyon in Arequipa. So the very first 7 are national reserves. In this regard, and also with everything that has been put forward here at this very important panel, I would like to commend the exemplary presentations, and we wholeheartedly trust that all of these opportunities are timely with the OAS to coordinate and work together by these initiatives. And what we have also identified all of the different tasks that we have to that we have to work on within the OAS. I urge all of member states that we need to approve the Declaration of Paraguay. We need to work together on this plan of action. I reaffirm Peru's commitment and our President Pedro Castillo Terrodes in terms of strengthening the Inter-American Commission on tourism at the OAS with our full support. We will be grappling all of the challenges for tourism together in the Americas. Our society is no longer the same after this pandemic, but from the Ministry of Tourism and Trade, we are taking on this responsibility. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Minister. We are waiting to see if there is another minister who would like to take the floor. Another member of this exemplary team. Thank you very much for your participation. I do not see any other requests to take the floor. I recommend that we take note of all the presentations and all of the comments by the member states. In light of the fact that there aren't any objections, we will now be concluding this session. We will now move on to the sixth plenary meeting. We will be starting the sixth plenary session to consider the draft declaration of Paraguay toward the reconstruction and reactivation of tourism post-COVID-19. Dear colleagues, after various months of negotiation, which included an informal meeting, and after holding a successful preparatory meeting where almost all OAS members states took part, I am delighted to put forward to you for your consideration the draft declaration of Paraguay towards the reconstruction and reactivation of tourism post-COVID-19. There would be document CD/tour/25/doc.3/21. In submitting it, I would like to recall that since the election of the CTOR authorities has been postponed to a later date, we need to delete the 11th declaratory paragraph, which refers to the above-mentioned authorities. Taking into account that detail, I would like to ask the floor if there is any delegation which would like to make a comment on this draft statement. Edmund Bartlett, Minister of Tourism of Jamaica, is recognized. You have the floor, sir. Please proceed, Minister. You have the floor. There being no other statements, based on what I understand, we all agree in approving this by acclamation. Since there aren't any objections, it is hereby approved. The declaration of Paraguay is hereby adopted by acclamation. This statement endorses our commitment to the sector and defines the measures we will be undertaken over the next 3 years. It goes without saying that these years will be complex, where we'll be focusing on rebuilding and revitalizing tourism. This declaration is the very basis, and in 3 months, the CTOR authorities and the Troika will meet to draw up the CTOR work plan, which we will be implementing over the next triennium. I congratulate all of you for this very important achievement, and I thank you for your support, your cooperation, and your openness to have this declaration today. We will now move on to the 7th plenary session, considering the issue of tourism post-COVID. To start these deliberations, I would like to welcome and offer the floor to Mr. Alberto Lopez, General Manager of the Costa Rican Tourism Institute. We all know Costa Rica's commitment to the environment and to sustainability. I'm wholeheartedly convinced that Mr. Lopez's presentation will convey his government's vision in this sphere and sustainable tourism in post-COVID-19 era. Mr. Lopez, my cordial greetings, and you have the floor, sir, for your presentation. Thank you very much, Minister. Can you please confirm that you can see my presentation on the screen? Yes, we can. Thank you very much, and we thank you on behalf of the Costa Rican Tourism Institute for this opportunity to be able to share Costa Rica's vision over the last few months in terms of the devastating effects that we have all felt in the world, especially on our continent in the Americas, due to COVID-19. I'm going to be focusing here, this would be the items I'm going to be addressing. I'm going to be thinking about our development model, first of all, and I will highlight that our model is not going to be changing in light of the current situation, the 3 points, selecting our model, the milestones in the model, and the strategies that we're going to be focusing. Number 2, the accesses where we are going to be prioritizing. These are the main ones, and it would be the bullet points are innovation, sustainability, and inclusion. I will be concluding talking about behavior and trends that where we feel our sector, both the public and private sector, will be working hand in hand, and we need to be able to tackle whatever it is may be coming after the pandemic. I will be starting out by reminding all of you in terms of the development model, and this is also well known. Costa Rica, basically speaking, has been focusing its development model. Its model is more on the supply than on the demand. I'm not saying that one is more important or better than the other in terms of supply and demand. Our model features main characteristics with a low level of investment. There is a very responsible level of use. It is very, we use our resources in a very responsible way. And on the other hand, there's also an economic component. Every single colon, which is the Costa Rican currency, that we are allocating to this touristic program or this initiative, comes at a higher cost. So we design the products this way, and that is what we are focusing on: innovation in the private sector, to designing this service, offering this product, and to keep our image to the best way possible forward. And in this regard, and this model that we have in terms of the supply or this offering, our tourist is going to be adapting. It is usually an adventurous tourist that is seeking out ecotourism. They want to adapt to that environment and to experience everything. This also means that this destination also needs to adapt to that specific tourist, which is very different from the other, the supply model. Now, the various milestones, there are various points I would like to underscore here where we are going to be stressing. First of all, I want to talk about the vision of our country. This is a very sound activity. We abolished our army numerous years ago. We protect the environment, and our national system is focusing on protecting nature. A state has invested highly in education, in our public education, to ensure that it is free in primary, secondary school, and at university schooling as well. And we are a state as well that we have created that has been in existence for many, many years. This is a model which we have identified, that we have created. We wanted to make sure that it would be the most natural as possible. We want to make sure that we avoid any artificial ingredients which would impact the lives of our culture, our heritage, our way of being. A third item here is the Costa Rican Tourism Institute is the governing body, and it has the ability to assist us in promoting ourselves, to make sure to entice these tourists to come into our country so that they also pay taxes. This is one of the goals that we have. And finally, we have a country brand, which is becoming stronger throughout the world, which has won awards, and we're very proud of this brand, which is we want it to be a country brand, not a tourist brand. So this is one of the main points especially for companies that export. Now, what are our strategies in terms of our development model? What are we going to be honing in on? We're going to be focusing on 4 items here that we do quite well. We do not want 10 or 12 strategies. We don't want to be spread out too thin. We want to really focus on finding out what are our best prospects. More than ever, with the scarce resources that we have, all countries in the world, we need to clearly identify where our tourists live that has the very best profile to come. And this way we are able to pinpoint, almost like a surgeon with a scalpel, to find which is the best tourist. Number 2, innovation. We want to make sure that in countries as small as ours, that we want to make sure that they come back again over and over. And I think that this is important. Over 40% of the tourists that come into Costa Rica, they come back again time and time again. And this is the end result of our ability to innovate. Number 3, how are we going to be setting ourselves apart? We want to be able to set ourselves apart in the world. We are a country that is focusing on sustainable tourism and focusing on climate change. We want to make sure that this is an ongoing trend. We want to help the tourist sector, tourism, through adapting and accommodating. Number 4, we need to make sure how we are positioned in all of the markets. We need to understand that we need to diversify within our markets. I will continue now in terms of what we need to prioritize. Here are the various items that we talked about. We talked about innovation. When we talk about innovation, we need to develop all of these tourist destinations. And we need to make sure that they are iconic for our destinations. We need to make sure that our companies, our tourist companies, are spread out throughout our entire country, so that it is throughout our country, and so that to avoid a high concentration in only some specific areas. Developing products. This is something from the private sector, and the public sector also has the high level of responsibility that this product that is developed needs to be aligned with our country's vision. Another important prong here, and we are talking about a responsible use of all types of resources, natural resources, cultural resources, our tourism heritage. We need to make sure that we focus in on our authenticity. We need to be genuine, and also the product that we are providing to these tourists, so that it does not denigrate, it does not impact, it does not hamper our image of being Costa Rican, that it is aligned with all of our objectives and the type of tourists that is coming into our country. Sustainability, finally, it must be profitable, because this is the only way. This is another part of sustainability, of loving and safeguarding our environment and our culture and our social responsibility. We cannot provide for sustainability if we do not have financial sustainability. Finally, I would like to talk about the model towards the future for Costa Rica. It's inclusive tourism. What does that mean? We need to foster, it needs to be human based. It provides solutions for all the people who work in tourism, that without all people, without regard for their gender, men or women, and including all people who are disabled as well. We want to make sure that this is a commendable endeavor in our model. We need to have a sector that has to focusing. We need to focus, and we are worried about the local, benefiting the local area, and sustainability as well. So we always have to provide equal opportunities for all. That was the last point. The last item here I would like to address in terms of behavior. It goes without saying that in the tourist sector there are 6 components here that I would like to address. how close we are. A tourist is willing to travel, but the closer the better. And all of the various focus areas in our strategy, they need to be geared toward looking closely. What is the profile of the tourists that we have? What are the new concerns? And I'm talking about using the various protocols and the concern of tourists for their own safety, their own health, and this is all linked to our traditional ways of thinking in the past. And our current day tourists, they already have expressed their concern with their health. And now the offices of tourism, the offices need to be open 24/7. They need to be open at all times, at any time at night that you are able to cancel. This cancellation policies now, more than ever, they need to be open-ended. We have to be willing and able, they have to be more flexible to be able to strike a balance in these initiatives. Finally, here in this graph, our average tourist that has already started to travel, or let's say with a certain level of freedom, normally speaking, they are younger. If our companies were able to accommodate all ages or groups of families, now that we have to rethink this, not only in the way we provide services, how they are attended to. This is a new group that is traveling. We need to be more responsible. What we are focusing on in our country, that our average tourist needs to be very responsible. They care about protecting our environment, protecting our tourist heritage, our cultural heritage as well. And luckily speaking, a very high percentage of these tourists are more concerned about these issues. And finally, the last component is try to separate yourself from people, go away, go afar. So in remote areas, and a large percentage of these tourists are seeking out this peace and quiet, where there isn't people there, where they do not have to be concerned of anything, or they don't even have to use these masks, because when they are away on their own, they don't have to use these masks. What are the trends now? And I'm going to be summing this up very quickly because I don't have time for anything further. These are these trends that are not only applicable to tourism, but rather for consumers, looking what the consumers do. We are rebuilding to improve. We are striving to coexist and to live together, to have an open air spaces, focusing on playing with time, and we are creating various projects in this regard. And we are trying to create new work areas as well, places where they can also think. So these are new trends. There's a specific type of behavior in all of these 10 trends that the consumers have. So this shows us how the company needs to adapt to leverage all of these trends and to focus on a plan for the tourist sector, which I cannot address at this juncture. However, what we need to pay special attention to all of these trends. Personally speaking, I have seen that all of these behaviors, we are seeing them, that they do repeat in the passing of time, then they turn into trends, and these trends are only but the reality of the future that we have. So it goes without saying that for the future, and we're focusing on tomorrow, this may actually happen even tomorrow on October the 7th, these trends are also going to be turning into a reality. I'm going to be concluding today by saying that we are going to be striving as a country, as a destination. We're going to be focusing on excellence so that our tourists can actually reap the benefits that everything Costa Rica has to provide them. The spirit of the Costa Rican people, this authentic experience that will fill their hearts and souls so that they can leave these countries and want to come back, that they can see all of the biodiversity that Costa Rica has to offer them, with all of the contact of all. We have 6.5% of all species in the world that will be able to see, that they can share our food, our culture, that they are able to enjoy all of this. Not only that they can see it and visit as a tourist, but they can also learn of what it means to be Costa Rica, who we are, what we are about, our day in, day out, our daily lives, to share this comprehensive experience, to see our flora and our fauna, our nature. We have all of this, that they can travel throughout our entire country and visit and explore everything, and to expand their minds through these 13 nights that they can spend in our country, that we can improve and enhance the lives of Costa Ricans, and so that all of these touristic destinations can also self-manage themselves and they can be safe destinations. If there is any doubt or any question that you may have, any queries, I am here, and if you want me to dive into anything further, here's my telephone number here up on the screen and my email. Once again, I would like to thank you for this opportunity that you have afforded me on today's, in this very special day, and thank you very much.
Importante destacar.
Thank you so much for your presentation. It's very important for the Americas and for its tourism competitiveness. Costa Rica is a reference point for sustainable development. The Americas, because of COVID-19, has lost connectivity. To analyze the mechanisms to recover this connectivity and improve it, we have invited Mr. Rafael Echevarne, Director of Airport Council International for Latin America and the Caribbean. Mr. Echevarne, thank you for being here this afternoon, and you have the floor, sir.
Señor Echevarne.
Sí, ahora.
Mr. Echevarne, yes. Thank you very much, Madam Minister. I apologize, I pushed the wrong button. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for inviting the Office of Latin America and the Caribbean of ACI. This is a fascinating issue. It's very important for our region, and in the ACI, we're extremely interested in supporting the Latin America and the Caribbean cities. And I thank you for allowing me to participate and address this topic. And although it sounds like a cliche, this terrible crisis provides us with an incredible opportunity, which is the possibility of rethinking how air transport should be in our region and how this can help everyone. Although we talk a lot about the progress we have made in terms of connectivity and open skies in the region, the reality is that we are far behind what has been achieved in the European market. Any airline can operate between and within any country without any restrictions in terms of destinations, frequencies, capacity, price, or nationality. We cannot maximize the socioeconomic potential of our region while there are restrictions in this regard. Aviation is a rara avis in the context of international trade. It is probably one of the most regulated and restricted industries in the world. While this is desirable in terms of safety, it is less so in terms of commercial development and the benefits that the population and the economy can derive from it. But still, we hear voices talking about protection of certain markets or concern about competition from certain operators. It is proven worldwide that protectionism and this imposition in the commercial aviation sector leads to inefficiencies, high operating costs, low competitiveness, high prices, and bankruptcy. The growth of air transport in the United States and Europe came about as a result of market deregulation. And the increases in the volume of traffic are directly related to opening the market. And the spectacular development of low-cost airlines was made possible thanks to this regulation and opening up of markets. In addition, we'd like to highlight that neighboring countries to these markets, such as in the European case, we have Morocco, have benefited from this spectacular growth by adopting these liberalizing measures instead of insisting on protectionism for their airlines. We know there are questions and concerns, but there are successful formulas currently being implemented in the region and other parts of the world to ensure air connectivity in remote areas with low demand. And they're very successfully implemented. In Latin America and the Caribbean, we need this for the development of tourism and for society and the economy in general. This is not a luxury. This is a need. There is no alternative to air transport. So the only way to maximize connectivity and the potential of our region is to adopt deregulation measures so that any airline can operate between any point without any commercial restrictions. Once this is achieved, the tourism industry, together with airports and governments, will work arduously, which is already the case in Latin America and some places in Europe, to position the different destinations, be they cities, regions, and countries, to airline operators. This is the best way to maximize connectivity in Latin America and the Caribbean, and especially with regard to secondary destinations. We just wanted to plant this seed, and of course, we are at your disposal if you have any questions. Thank you very much. That was an extremely important and clear presentation, Mr. Echevarne. This is the time when governments, airports, and the tourism sector must work together to recover and improve connectivity. Your presentation has been very compelling, and I appreciate your attendance here. The slogan of World Tourism Day 2021 is Tourism for Inclusive Growth. And so I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Sergio Rodriguez, who is from the International Organization on Social Tourism, so he can talk about inclusive growth in tourism. You have the floor, sir. Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you. Thank you very much. First of all, good afternoon. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be able to speak with you briefly. The crisis of COVID has allowed us to take a pause and to reflect on the design or redesign of the development model that we have had heretofore, in keeping with what we need in the future. We are thinking about what we need, not what we want. At the International Organization for Social Tourism, we support governments to make changes, public policy, in order to have a tourism that is sustainable and socially responsible, as well as transformative. For us, the best way to have inclusive growth in the Americas is fostering citizenship. Inhabitants can be excluded, but citizens cannot. As an international organization which seeks universal access to vacations and responsible actors in the tourism sector, we thank you for allowing us to be here, but we want to propose to the plenary consideration of some measures which in the short term could promote tourism, which could help create citizens and therefore include everyone. I'm going to talk about 3 levels: democratic governance and management, development of tourism for all, and development of demand for local tourism, regional and national tourism. With regard to democratic governance and development, we think we need new discourse which links tourism to other sectors: health, recreation, sport, environment, urban development, so we can generate actions and policies that are aligned with development policies. We applaud the 2050 tourism agenda that CTOUR is proposing, and it includes these new ideas, concepts, and approaches, which helps us see the new dimension tourism can have. Based thereon, we need the development of new success indicators, which we include decent work, gender equity, family integration, school participation, human development, and this will allow us to know what is the situation and how tourism can improve this. The third thing is that we need networks of local leaders that work in an intersectoral way and in a supranational way with a regional approach. And so we have developed a diploma at our organization, a diploma on social and sustainable tourism, and these initiatives need to be more frequent so we can have more networks of collaboration. We need to support commercial and professional associations about social tourism, sustainable tourism. For example, there is an organization in Cancun that is supporting this effort. And we're working with people on the ground. Now, with regard to the tourism offer for everyone, countries need to think about how we can develop and change the way we are promoting tourism, and at the same time have different kinds of projects to be able to conserve the environment and heritage in different destinations. Those projects already exist. We also need environmental social criteria when we are coming up with operational and infrastructure projects for tourism sectors, especially when we're talking about Easter Island and other places that are very sensitive. We need to have strict criteria. We also need sustainable criteria for development, such as short supply chains, empowerment of local suppliers, and products from local destinations. We have a program promoted by the Argentine Agricultural Institute, which is promoting this kind of initiatives. There's a local cuisine initiative in Mexico. These initiatives can help us to generate this kind of collaboration. We need to certify local know-how, regional standards. There is a certification for popular cuisine, certification for tourism guide. We need to increasingly promote this, and we need to strengthen our economic chains in different destinations. This happens in Quebec, in Canada. A series of organizations, not only tourism organizations, but other organizations that work in the recreational center, come together. Now, with regard to promoting local and regional tourism demand, we need social policies that are explicitly aimed at doing away with obstacles for local populations, economic, social, psychological, and physical obstacles. The case of Chile, where we have vacations for the elderly, this is a great example. We should also have mechanisms for funding to allow access to culture, recreation, vacations, For example, in Guatemala, we have a private sector mechanism. In Colombia, another. In Brazil, there is one as well. These are solutions that are created in our own region and can be replicated in other countries. These are some of the ideas that our organization, the International Organization on Social Tourism, believes can be a first step towards a new kind of tourism. It is not just an export economic sector, it is a sector where we create citizens. And so we need to take this first step to have a responsible, sustainable, and inclusive society, which is what we want for all our countries. At the highest level, we need to work on new tourism policies that have a social focus without undermining economic or environmental aspects. Humans need to be at the center of everything because nothing else makes sense. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you very much, Mr. Rodriguez. It is clear that we need to be inclusive if we want to have a tourism from which vulnerable individuals and groups can benefit. Now we're going to have our ministerial dialogue. We have a lot to talk about because of these interesting presentations. So I'd now like to open up the floor to any representative who would like to speak, who has a question or a comment. I would appreciate if you could speak for no more than 3 minutes. The floor is open.
¿Tenemos alguna solicitud?
Do we have any request for the floor? We have the Minister of Guatemala requesting the floor. Go ahead, please. I wanted to address the issue of air connectivity. I think that now in Central America, the revitalization of connectivity, air connectivity, is extremely important. Many of the countries that are receiving cruise ships are ready for this. To revitalize the cruise industry, but air connectivity to Central America and Caribbean nations is so important because many of the countries of origin which are important for Central America and the Dominican Republic have high rates of vaccination, and the destination countries, well, most of the countries have also high rates of vaccination in their tourism sectors. I'm talking about guides, tour operators, people who work in transport. I think at this point, we need to make a call upon airlines that fly to Central America, that they work together with ministries of tourism, and this is part of the SICA agenda in Central America, that we have lower airline tickets, lower prices, so we can promote the region. We need to really have people coming from the North and the Caribbean this way. So I applaud efforts made, and I also applaud what the minister is doing with hubs in Panama. I would like to see a greater increase in airline flights to Central America. And thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister.
Prevención. Sugiero.
I see no further requests for the floor, so I suggest we take note of the presentations and also comments made by our representatives. We will now move on to our 8th plenary session. We now need to agree on the place and time for the 26th Inter-American Congress of Ministers and High Authorities on Tourism, which will take place in 2024. And I would like to remind you that we have received offers from the government of Ecuador and Paraguay to host this Congress. In my capacity as head of the delegation of the Republic of Paraguay, and after conversations with the government of Ecuador, I would like to inform you that my government has decided to withdraw its offer to host the 26th Inter-American Congress of Ministers and High Authorities on Tourism in favor of our sister country, the Republic of Ecuador, a country that is known for its beauty and hospitality. If delegations are willing and ready to support this, I would propose that this Congress accept the kind offer of Ecuador to host the 26th Inter-American Congress of Ministers and High Authorities of Tourism 2024. If there are no objections, it is so decided. We will now move on to our closing session. Esteemed colleagues, special guests, we have now concluded the deliberations of the 25th Inter-American Congress of Ministers and High Authorities of Tourism, and we now kick off our closing session. I would like to invite Kim Osborne, the Executive Secretary for Integral Development, to speak. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Minister. Good afternoon to you again. Good afternoon, Ministers of Tourism and High Authorities of Tourism of the Hemisphere, distinguished delegates, distinguished representatives of member states, specially invited guests, representatives of the private sector, international organizations, all. As we bring this meeting to a close, allow me to begin by expressing my deep appreciation to Minister Montiel of Paraguay for steering us through this very fruitful day of discussions and dialogue. Minister, our thanks to you and your team for your leadership of this process. Our thanks also to the Ministers of Tourism and Ministers and high-level authorities of tourism who have taken the time to be here today and for their valuable contributions to the dialogue. To our private sector partners, representatives of international organizations, and others who have joined us today, thank you for being here. We want to continue working with you towards our shared solutions for the people of our region. Distinguished ministers, distinguished member states, colleagues, today's 25th Inter-American Congress of Ministers and High-Level Authorities of Tourism was held at a time when the tourism sector, for the most part, remains in the midst of the worst crisis since World War II. Several countries in our hemisphere remain focused on finding the appropriate balance between protecting their residents from the ravages of the COVID-19 pandemic and supporting the opening of the tourism sector, from which so many derive their livelihood. The dialogue and discussions over the course of the day has served to confirm the critical importance that reconstructing and rebuilding the tourism sector means for OAS member states. The participation of representatives of the private sector, international organizations, together with the highest tourism authorities within our region during the discussions today is a clear signal that solutions to this crisis continues to require collaboration, cooperation, partnerships, and the active participation of all actors. The search for solutions to support the rebuilding and reconstruction is perhaps even more critical now, as the pandemic is well into its second year and its effects on tourism in some instances have become even more entrenched. The OAS has over the last 3 years provided an important platform for discourse on these issues surrounding sustainable tourism, and more importantly, the impact of the pandemic on tourism, on the tourism sector, in particular through the work of the CTOUR. The Congress today has reinforced this effort or has sustained this effort. The Declaration of Paraguay, which member states and high-level authorities have adopted today, reflects the collective resolve of OAS member states to help chart a course for a safe and successful recovery. It also carries with it both the ideals and potential areas for cooperation for all countries to be able to embrace tourism recovery for our region. It proposes joint actions to reactivate travel and tourism in the Americas in a safe and sustainable manner, and encourages the preparation of a flexible plan that supports the recovery. I also want to take this opportunity to reiterate our thanks for the contributions of the members of the leadership of the CTOUR, the chair, Miguel Torruco of Mexico, Secretary of Tourism of Mexico, as well as the vice chairs, Jamaica and Panama. We thank you for your stewardship during these very turbulent times. Chair, allow me to thank the team at the Secretariat for Integral Development, led by Maryse Robert within the Department of Economic Development. Allow me to thank the team within the policy section of my office, Estela Diaz-Avalos and Sandra Burns. Allow me to thank the team at the Department of Conferences, Magali Ruff, Fernando Soleil, Luis Page, and Joel. Thank you so much for accompanying us throughout this process. And especially to all interpreters, whom I always thank because they take the time to do such a beautiful job. Thank you for your presence, for your continued support as we go through what continues to be a series of dialogues, not only within tourism, but within several areas of development. In closing, Chair, I want to pledge our continued support, the continued support of the Secretariat for Integral Development in championing our collective efforts through the OAS to guide us out of this current difficult environment and to return to a more prosperous tourism for the countries of the region. Again, thank you, Minister, for your stewardship of this process. And with this, thank you for taking the time. Thank you for listening.
Muchas gracias por sus palabras.
Thank you very much, Ms. Osborne, for your kind words. Ecuador is requesting the floor. Ecuador is recognized. Good afternoon. I am Silvana Ramirez, Undersecretary of the Ministry of Tourism. Cordial greetings on behalf of the Minister of Tourism of Ecuador, Niels Olsen. For Ecuador, it is a privilege to be the headquarters of the 26th Inter-American Congress of Ministers and High-Level Authorities of Tourism of the Americas. In addition to being the host, we will have the opportunity to show all of the participants our capabilities, our infrastructure, and the services focusing on biodiversity, our ancestral cultures that are alive and well in our country, and more importantly, the kindness of our people. This opportunity we are taking on with the conviction that this opportunity will be a meeting of all of these high-level authorities. They will put forward their experiences. It would help to improve cooperation, touristic competitiveness, and improving the relationships among our member countries. Ecuador has adopted the seal of the WWTTC. We have use the biosafety protocols, and we have worked in implementing them in our sector. This makes it possible to make our visitors trust us and have a higher level of trust. In addition, it also promotes innovation, which is related to our rural areas. We are fostering touristic products that are linked to the agricultural production in our countries, community-based tourism, our protective areas, and other activities that are carried out in these areas. We have this opportunity to showcase, in addition to all of these high-level authorities of tourism, the wealth of our heritage, like Quito, Cuenca cities, which have been declared of cultural heritage of UNESCO, and our biodiversity in our entire Amazonic region, the mountain ranges of the Andes, the extended miles of beaches, the Galapagos Islands, which is a source of knowledge on evolution and knowledge and enchantment. This post-pandemic era is putting us in an encouraging situation for sustainable development, for tourism. The trends in the world, we are focusing on the well-being of these communities that will be receiving and welcoming these people. This is a perspective that will foster economic growth and taking care of people who are engaged. On behalf of Ecuador, we would like to have been appointed as the host. We would like to thank all of the member states here and on the 25th Inter-American Congress of Ministers and High-Level Authorities of Tourism. We hope that our industries will recover soon in all of your countries. Thank you very much. It has been a day of presentations and shared experiences together. All of this will contribute to the decision-making process in implementing these unified public policies with a view to benefiting all of the regional tourism. On behalf of the President of the Republic of Paraguay, Don Mario Abdo Benitez, I would like to thank the trust that you have bestowed upon our country of Paraguay in carrying out this Congress. Thank you very much, dear colleagues and international authorities. Thank you to all of the technical teams who have worked arduously to make sure that this Congress would come to fruition successfully. From the National Secretariat of Tourism, we reaffirm our commitment to work and to move forward on all of these initiatives which will benefit the tourism in our countries. And every single member nation of the Organization of American States, the OAS, to restore the confidence in all of our travelers and to achieve the sustained and the complete recovery of tourism in the Americas. Tourism unites us and allows us to move forward and to build with creativity, inclusion, and sustainability. Thank you once again. And from here, I'm telling you all, America, Paraguay is waiting for you. We are a safe destination designed and prepared just for you. Thank you very much.
Secretario Osborne. Muchas gracias, señora ministra.
Gracias. Gracias, Luis. Gracias, señora ministra. Thank you, Luis.
My pleasure. Should I close the session?
I think so, yes. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome.